They were stolen during one of the most violent colonial raids in African history. Now, after 120 long years, 119 sacred artifacts from Nigeria's Benin Kingdom are finally coming home, returned by the Netherlands. But this isn't just a feel-good story about museums and sculptures. This is about justice, about reclaiming stolen identity, and about Africa finally getting back what was violently taken from it. Let's dive deep into what happened, why it matters, and what comes next. Let's go back to 1897. The Kingdom of Benin in present-day southern Nigeria was one of the most advanced civilizations in West Africa, known for its powerful monarchy, advanced political systems, and stunning works of art, especially its iconic bronze and ivory sculptures. Benin was respected across the continent. But everything changed when British forces launched a violent military expedition into Benin City. It wasn't a fair battle. It was a raid, a full-scale invasion. Palaces were looted, fire set to royal homes, nobles were murdered. And then came the theft. Thousands of irreplaceable bronze plaques, ivory tusks, carved wooden statues, and ceremonial objects were stolen and shipped off to Europe. These weren't just artifacts. They were living history, family lineage, sacred symbols, evidence of a powerful African civilization. And for the next century, these treasures would sit in the display cases of Western museums, admired by the world, but kept far from the people who made them. So how did they end up in the Netherlands? After the British looted the artifacts, they were auctioned across Europe. Some ended up in private collections, others in state museums. The Netherlands acquired many of them over the years, through purchases, exchanges, and colonial collections during its own time as a European empire. By the late 20th century, over 100 Benin artifacts were sitting in Dutch institutions. But back in Nigeria, the people never forgot. Generations of historians, leaders, and citizens kept asking the same question: when are we getting our treasures back? For years, European museums resisted. They argued that they were protecting the artifacts, that African countries lacked the resources or facilities to care for them properly, that the art was safer in Europe. But that argument never sat well with Nigerians, or with much of the global African diaspora. How can someone steal your house, hang your family photos on their wall, and say you can't take care of them? It was insulting, and it was wrong. The pressure kept building. Activists raised their voices. Social media campaigns went viral. Governments started to feel the heat. And finally, change came. In October 2023, the Dutch government made it official. They would return 478 looted artifacts to former colonies, including 119 Benin bronzes to Nigeria. This was the largest cultural restitution in Dutch history. The move followed a recommendation from an independent Dutch committee that said, these artifacts were stolen, not gifted, and justice required they be returned. It was a powerful statement, one that acknowledged the painful reality of colonialism and the theft it was built on. And for Nigeria, it was a breakthrough. The returned pieces are now in the hands of Nigeria's National Commission for Museums and Monuments. They're being prepared for public display at several cultural centers and museums, including the upcoming Edo Museum of West African Art in Benin City, designed to house and honor the legacy of the Benin Kingdom. This museum won't just display these artifacts, it will tell their story. The real story. Not from the perspective of the colonizer, but from the voice of the people they were stolen from. For Nigerians, this is more than just a museum opening, it's a spiritual homecoming. But this return raises even bigger questions. If the Netherlands can return stolen African artifacts, why haven't others done the same? The British Museum in London still holds over 900 Benin bronzes. Germany has made promises to return its collection, but progress has been slow. France has returned a few items to Benin Republic, but thousands remain. The Smithsonian in the US has taken some action, but there's more to do. Why is it so hard for these institutions to return what everyone knows was stolen? Because it's not just about art, it's about power. These artifacts represent more than beauty. They represent African genius, sovereignty, and history. To return them is to admit that Africa was never a blank slate, that its civilizations were advanced, organized, and worthy of respect long before Europe's arrival. So where do we go from here? The return of the 119 artifacts by the Netherlands is a major victory. But it's only the beginning. Thousands of African treasures are still sitting in foreign museums. Each one is a reminder of what was taken and what still needs to be restored. Africa is not begging for its culture, it's demanding it back. And every artifact that returns home is a step toward healing. Let's be clear. Returning these items is not charity, it's not a favor, it's justice, it's accountability, and it's part of rewriting the story of Africa, not as a victim of history, but as a force reclaiming its power. This story may have taken 120 years to reach this chapter, but it's far from over. More countries are watching, more people are asking questions, and more pressure is being applied, because the truth can no longer be hidden behind museum glass. So, what do you think? Should all stolen African artifacts be returned? Which country should be next to step up? Let me know in the comments. And if this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe. Because this isn't just news, it's a movement. And we'll be right here to cover it, every step of the way. So, what do you think? Should all stolen African artifacts be returned? Which country should be next to step up? Let me know in the comments. But let's not forget, this is not just about museums or governments. It's about memory, identity, and the dignity of a people. When a culture is robbed of its history, it's robbed of its confidence, of its truth. For decades, African children were taught that greatness came from outside, from Europe, from empires, from colonizers. But these artifacts, these sacred objects, tell a different story. They prove that Africa had kingdoms, architecture, bronze casting techniques, diplomatic systems, and spiritual traditions long before colonization. That knowledge was buried, but now, piece by piece, it's being uncovered. And with every sculpture returned, a young African sees their worth reflected in their past. With every bronze brought home, a page of history is rewritten with pride. This return is not just for Nigeria. It's for Congo, for Ethiopia, for Ghana, for Mali, for every nation whose treasures were looted and sold. And as the global conscience wakes up, the message becomes louder. Africa is no longer asking politely. It's reclaiming its legacy, one artifact at a time. The age of stolen history is ending, and a new era of restoration has begun. But here's what comes next. As these treasures return home, African nations must prepare, not only to preserve them, but to amplify their stories. It's not enough to bring back the bronzes. We must also rebuild the institutions, the museums, and the cultural infrastructure that honors them. This is where leadership matters. Governments must invest in secure, accessible museums, not just in capital cities, but in the regions where these artifacts were born. They must support artists, historians, educators, and cultural guardians who will carry these stories forward, not just as exhibitions, but as national pride. Africa's past cannot live behind glass. It must live in classrooms, in films, in books, in music, and in the hearts of its people. And yes, accountability must go both ways. We cannot demand artifacts without preparing to receive and protect them. We must treat these pieces not as trophies, but as ancestors, as sacred witnesses to our journey. And they must never again be taken, by corruption, by neglect, or by war. At the same time, this moment is forcing a global reckoning. For decades, Western museums have been the final word on what culture means, who defines it, and who owns it. But that era is over. Young people from Lagos to London are demanding transparency. They're using social media to expose hypocrisy, organize pressure, and build global solidarity. And now, even institutions in the West are being forced to reconsider their colonial foundations. Questions that were once dismissed are now unavoidable. Who built this collection? Who benefited? And who was silenced in the process? The answers are uncomfortable, but necessary. Because real healing begins with truth. And beyond symbolism, this shift is economic too. Cultural heritage is powerful. It drives tourism, education, creative industries, and national branding. Countries like Egypt, Morocco, and South Africa already understand this and are investing in museums and heritage as pillars of soft power. Nigeria and others must follow suit. Reclaiming our history isn't just about the past, it's about the future. It's about jobs for curators, filmmakers, archaeologists, designers. It's about restoring pride, because when you control your story, you control your destiny. This is why the return of those 119 artifacts matters so deeply. It's not just about physical objects. It's about Africa declaring, "We are the authors of our story. No more erasure, no more silence, no more stolen glory in foreign glass boxes." This is the start of a global rewrite, led by Africans for Africans, with the world finally listening. So, if you're watching this from the diaspora, from Africa, or from anywhere in the world, know this: every statue returned is a symbol. Every artifact repatriated is a victory. And every story reclaimed is a nation healing, rising, and remembering who it truly is. Africa is not waiting anymore. It's restoring. It's rising. And history is finally coming home.